Hey everyone, it's been a bit of a while since recorded a video or posted one, but I thought it was worth going through a couple of things. Essentially, well, for Liverpool Regional I played Rayquaza, which was actually the deck that ended up winning. I, of course, was not the person playing the deck that ended up winning. I got a bit unlucky, shall we say. I ended up playing, I think, 12 games that day, and 6 of them I had a completely dead start in my hand. So yeah, that wasn't great. I won 2 of the 5 rounds I ended up playing though. It was 2 wins, 2 losses, and a tie. I'll take you through that a little bit. Basically, going into the event, I thought Ray was going to be a good play. It was the hype deck for quite a while at the very start, and then people realised there was just so many easy ways to counter it. Garb just destroys it. Parallel City, even Tina. So Tina, obviously not with Garb in play, just destroys it. Basically, yeah, it has quite a few problems. So gave that a bit of thought, and that's why I basically came to the conclusion of playing the 2 Jolteon at the time. This build only actually has 1, but 2 Jolteon and a Jirachi. Essentially, if they ever try Tina you have the option to Jirachi, which means if they try and Tina and parallel lock you, you can then replace the stadium, because they'll not really want to Chaos Will the turn after, because then you can just remove another double Dragon Energy. Jolteon, of course, is really good against Veltal Garb and Dark Tina, because they use pure basics and really were skimping, cutting on the ropes. The winning lists, or the lists that have done really well, I believe, all played 3 float, 1 Olympia, and not actually playing any escape rope. I'm not sure if that's actually true for the Veltal list, but I'll have to look. But yeah, with Garb, obviously, the switching cards just become 3 float, and that really works for Jolteon. And well, Garb, of course, is a bit of a problem itself, but you just have to take that as it comes and try and Lysander it. I only actually played 1 Lysander for the event, just because I was really struggling to find space for the second. But yeah, it was a bit of a shame. I ended up going against 5 Garbs, and it didn't even matter most of the time because I drew dead to begin the game. But I beat a Scizor Garb that played 3 parallel Team Flagrant and Hammers. 1 game he did get 3 Hammer Tails, but I still lost that game, so that doesn't count. I somehow managed to win 2 of those games. It was yeah, it's a bit of very much what you'd call an uphill struggle kind of game, but it was it's quite satisfying being able to take a win off a bad matchup, but then very unsatisfying drawing completely dead. But yeah, in testing it was doing quite well. Even against Dark Tina Garb, which should be the real bad matchup, it was not losing, basically, because of the little tricks and the little things I have in the deck. So yeah, well, updated the list a little bit for London, changed a few cards around. I've cut down to 3 Spirit Link. I found often those were kind of just being attached all over the place, because like on Jolteons mostly, just because they had no use later in the game. I'd normally evolve 1 turn 1, and then I'd get another raid later in the game, and that would be the game. That would be basically, if I lose those, I'd often have 1 Ray and a Spirit Link to finish up. But 4 was actually just not as needed as I thought. It means getting a turn, say going second, getting a turn 1 KO is a little bit harder, but the deck wasn't really doing that anyway. I find it quite hard to, even with 3 Hooper, 4 Shaman, 4 Skyfield, all that stuff, it just wasn't happening. So decided to just hedge my bets and just play the 3. Well, I'll go through the list actually, card by card. Basically, 3/3 Ray I feel is okay. It is obviously, well, between that and Jolteon, probably the best starter. But you have switching cards, enough of them to find by turn 2, turn 3 to switch into the Ray to start attacking with it. I was perfectly fine with 3 throughout the day as well at Liverpool, except the games where I I will say though, those games I'd still start with Ray, so it doesn't matter too much. No starter really is too bad in this deck. Even Dragonite's hefty retreat cost isn't terrible. You can still get the float or find the rope or switch and even Skylar for them. So yeah, 3/3 Ray. I play all three of these, the colourless ones. Basically, I found the Dragon one to not really pull any weight at all. The 30 for DC isn't very good. It's better against non-EXs, I guess, but that wasn't, you know, happening too much. There's no Joltik in form. Actually, I guess there is, but it's different Joltik. Yeah, Lightning weakness isn't as big. Only real downside would have been Raichu Bats, but Fairy was obviously quite big going into this tournament. So taking a weakness to that on the baby was kind of pointless. Also, the attack, well, I was expecting a fair bit of EX stuff, and just chipping for 60 for 1 NG is actually quite good. If you can manage that and the Hex on Tina with Mega Ray with 5 bench, which obviously won't happen too often because they'll be paralleling you, but that's 150 plus the 60 as a knockout. So yeah, pretty reasonable. I also actually found Dragon Pulse came into play a few times. I think at least once. I was drawing dead, but I'd hit 3 energy and a Baby Ray to attack, and I believe the cards I discarded were Trainer's Mail versus Seeker and Sycamore with the Dragon Pulse at the tournament. One thing this is actually quite good for is against Mega Mewtwo. If they have Garb down and you can't really get Pokemon to fill up your bench, and they have a Shrine, you can actually use these attacks to do the little extra chip and knock out. And Dragon Pulse for 100 is actually, you know, between 3 and 4 benched Pokemon with Emerald Break, so that would be that'd be pretty reasonable. It was actually even tested okay against Mega Mewtwo, which I expected a bit of a decline of, but it was worth just having these Rays in play for that situation. Of course, play only the Delta Evolution one. You want to evolve turn 1. You don't really need to fully heal at any point. Ray swings. If Ray does survive a couple of hits, it generally is winning you that game, so that's okay. But you don't need to, like, it won't take the hit and then you heal. Normally, it'll take the hit as a Mega Ray and just evolving turn 1. Yep, so 4 Shaman, basically just you want maximised consistency, you want to set up a lot. Went up to 3 Hooper. That's because a lot of the time you'd be parallel city'd or have your stadium replaced, you'd have to discard a bunch of stuff. Having Super Rod and Karen and whatever, you'd just be able to Hooper, fill up your bench again, get some knockouts. This, of course, is a list for the upcoming format. The new format, I guess it's already going to be happening from this weekend, and it's already being played online. So I've got 2 Dragonites in here. Dragonite is actually, it's a bit less potent in this deck than Gardevoir. That's just because Gardevoir can discard everything. So your Dragonites can go in the discard pile. You can, you know, Super Rod back in some cards. You can Super Rod it back in, say, a Dragonite and 2 Shaman, or Dragonite, Shaman and Ray. Ultra Ball for the Dragonite, pull a Hooper out of your discard pile and another Pokemon, Hooper for the Pokemon you put back in the deck, so on, you get the point. But it's still really strong in this because you expect stadium replacements really often. The count of 2 is just so you can keep cycling. It's just a really nice card to have. It helps out some of Ray's weaknesses. So yeah, and also it's actually not the best Lysander Steel target. That it's not a great one that people think it is, because Hyper Beam is actually it's a bit of an overcosted attack, but it's very possible that you will Hyper Beam if you're being locked. If they Lysander Dragonite and you attach double colours to it, it's got threat that it can retreat into a Ray and attack, and it's actually got threat that it can Hyper Beam, and it's pretty strong, the effect of the attack. I didn't realise. I actually thought you had to discard an energy off your Dragonite for the attack, so I was a bit I wasn't liking this as much. But yeah, reading it and seeing that it discards an energy off your opponent's active Pokemon is actually really good. Probably won't come into play too often, but it's just nice to have. I've still gone for 1 Jolteon. Ray's problems are still Ray's problems, really. I expect a decline of a lot of those decks, so that's why the decrease has gone to 1. Yeah, just Flash Ray against, say, a Veltal Garb and Dark Tina Garb's pretty good. It's not really much else to say. It's also probably the best starter because of free retreats, so yeah, can't deny that. But I'm expecting a bit more, say, Gardevoir, Volcanion, which plays a heavy rope count, you know, those kind of decks. Even Sizzle, because of how well it did at Liverpool, piloted by a few friends of mine, 2 of them making top 8, and one of them getting a bit unlucky. Alex wrote his deck list wrong, I believe, so he got a game loss against Gardevoir, and sadly Gardevoir can take a game in a best of 3 against Sizzle. It's quite hard, but it can do it, and that's what happens. So would have probably been a bit of an easy streak to the final from there as well, because Sizzle has pretty decent Ray matchup, I'd say. It's not completely blow away, but it's pretty solid. The winning list played Magearna, and that was, of course, to you know, it handles things like Jirachi removing double colourless, or you know, the what's the other thing? Sizzle also removing double colourless, but I just don't think that's really as good as Jolteon. Basically, I think it's okay. It's also, obviously, it can one-hit a Guardy, but you know, that's not the hardest thing to do with this deck. It's and you'd need to commit 3 NG to a Magearna that can actually die to a Guardy quite easily. So yeah, I wasn't a big fan of that. Obviously, it worked out for Cedric, the guy who won, and yeah, congratulations to him. I'm definitely not salty or anything. And one Jirachi, of course, because you still have to fight Plumebox. You're still gonna have to fight Dark Tina, and every now and then there'll just be special NG heavy decks, kind of like a Veltal, things like that. And Jirachi's just really good against it. Only the one though. I actually kind of wanted 2, but I found it was a bit more niche than you know, from testing, than I originally thought. One thing that's actually been pretty useful in is the Rainbow Road matchup. Of course, if they play the heavy elixir and can get 3 fairy NG, that can be quite tricky to handle. But you can, of course, kill it with a Ray. But if they don't play the break, you have the Jolteon. If they do play the break, you can still just Jirachi their double colourless, which is it's pretty good, and it's won me a couple of games in testing, being able to Stardust 3 double colourless energies away. Yeah, so that's the Pokemon line. Into the supporter line, one of the Guardy decks that did well, I think Maze and Britpibus played it, had only 2 Sycamore, and I thought that was a little bit greedy considering the amount of Garb there's going to be. You can't rely on Pokemon Draw, and I actually think Silent Lab is quite a underrated stadium for the format, so I'd say Lab is quite strong, and you can't always replace it, so you want a slightly higher count of draw supporters, just in case you can't keep the Pokemon train going. So yeah, 3 Sycamore, you all know what that does by now. Only 1 N. I kind of would like 2, but you tend to be the first person to take prizes, so N isn't like as potent. Obviously N and taking a KO late game is actually really strong, but you can generally find it by that point in the game. So because of the way that Rayquaza tends to draw, so that's perfectly fine. 2 Lysander. I played only 1 at Liverpool, and I really regretted that. It wouldn't have helped any of the games I was dead drawing, but it's just so powerful when you can take one-hit knockouts basically anywhere on the board. It's really strong with Jolteon, say against if you're against, say, Dark Tina and Pokemon has only you know, small amount of HP left, and that would be their biggest threat. You can just knock it out with a Flash Ray or something like that. Yeah, so it's just too strong not to play as a 2 of. 1 Karen, I personally really like this card. I think the winning list kind of, he opted for like Super Odd plus Puzzles of Time style, which is okay, but I think I guess to win a big tournament, you know, you have to get a bit lucky. But with that build, if you come across a 2 or 3 parallel deck, which 4 of my rounds of the 5 that they've parallel was played in counts of 2 or 3. So yeah, I think it's a little bit greedy, and so I play the Karen. But yeah, if you're like end to a low hand, which will happen, and you can't, your super odds already played, you can't guarantee that puzzles will just be in your hand to be able to replay the super odd and everything. So I kind of like Karen for that once per game, basically, when you have the chance to play it. Also works really well with Dragonite. You can, I mentioned another play, but another play, of course, is Dragoniting for a Hooper and a Pokemon, Karening back in everything else, and then Hoopering for those Pokemon. It's really strong. Yeah, really good card. I played one Skylar. I actually think Skylar's really strong in Mega decks. Often you need one piece of a puzzle, essentially, to get yourself going. This deck and Guardi really epitomise that. Often you need, say, the Link or the Stadium, like Skyfield or the Ultra Ball, because you'll have one of the other pieces in your hand, and then you can get going and set up. Another thing as well, obviously, is it can get the switching card you need for that turn. Super odd, even a supporter for next turn. I just really like Skylar and Mega decks. That's it, really. Only one Hex. I'd really like 2, because of the way Ray kind of plays. Is if you can set up Hex, you probably are winning that game, because you just set up everything. They can't do anything. You take a knockout the next turn, and potentially even Hex again, but they can't set up to stop you, to force you to need to draw more cards with Sycamore. So you can then Hex again and take a knockout, and yeah, just it can make the deck cycle really well. But basically, without Compressor, I found that was a little bit like weaker. You can't really just compress away a lot of the useless cards and then draw only the useful cards and then Hex each turn. So settled with only one. It's obviously really good against Tina. It's just good against, say, Volcanion, to stop them being able to destroy you. Yeah, just really all-round good card. Like I said, I'd like 2, but I'm not really willing to make another cut in this list for the second one. And like I said, it's not as important as it used to be, because Compressor isn't quite as big. Play 4 versus Seeker, because there's no reason not to. It's just it's just obviously a good card, and yeah, you often actually burn 1 early game, but then if you cut down to 3, you'd be burning 1 of 3, so that's a bit of a shame. And it's just really strong to reuse Karen and the one-off supporters for Ultra Ball, because for Ultra Ball only 3 Trainers Mail. It's a bit of a shame. Again, that's a card I'd like 4 of, but the deck's quite tight for space. Consideration has been to cut the Hooper, because that would just help the deck kind of draw and cycle more, and that's something I'm not against. If you think that's better, feel free to message, explain your reasons, all that stuff. But I think 3 is kind of okay. There are certain decks where I don't think I'd ever go below 4, because of the way the deck draws, and often Elixir decks, I'd say, is a deck that needs to hit Elixirs even, is a deck that I'd like to not go below 4, because you take cards out of your deck, you can then hit Elixirs more easily. But 3 seems okay with this, just helps you to set up and draw and dig for, say, a support late game. Switching cards, I play 1 Switch, 1 Rope, and 1 Floatstone. And I don't think I'd change that. The winning list again played 3 Floatstone, but that kind of makes you weak to Regice. I know you can Jirachi or Regice, but they can also attach 3 waters. So, and they can, Lysander around, say if it's Plume Box, they can just Lysander around Jirachi and hit into a Hooper until they can Lysander the Jirachi again. No, it's not very likely to happen, but it's possible. And any decks that like a kind of prioritizing Regice are running heavy water. I don't think that's the only reason, of course. I'm running this way round. I just think the an actual active switching card is quite strong. 3 Floatstone as well. They just go when you get paralleled, so you end up without as many, and then you have to put the Pokemon back down anyway, so you end up without as many free retreaters, and you also put them Floatstone, the way the sort of the deck plays is you will just play them as you hit them to draw more cards through that. Of course, you do have puzzles of time, but I just prefer the active switching cards. Being able to Skylar for them as well is pretty big, so you can Skylar for the specific one you need. Played quite a few times when I've needed specifically switch, and so I Skylared for it, and I've had to take rope or float. Well, generally rope, sadly, because yeah, sometimes I want to knock out the active, but I've had to rope to knock out something else to get my my game going. But yeah, I just really like the 1-1-1 style. I think that's the better way to play it. If you play puzzles, I also think maybe the 1-1-1 is better, because you can pick up the specific one you need. Rope's still pretty strong. Early game as well, it's just like another Lysander. So yeah, that's that. 3 Mega Turbo, just because your Lightning Energy does go, and then you can rebuild Rays quite quick. It also gives you a small chance to get the turn 2 or the turn 1 KO. Well, turn 1 more so, I guess turn 2 you can just attach to energy, but KO. It also allows you to get a Ray with 3 lightnings attacking rather than a lightning and double colourless, which is obviously better against a slightly heavier E-Hammer. It's better against Jirachi and Scizor. So yeah, 3 I think is the right number. 2 is too low, and 4 is a bit too oversaturating because you only have 4 lightning. 1 special charge. I really like this card. I guess the kind of cards I play in place of puzzles do similar-ish effect in terms of recovery, but yeah, the special charge I really like. Basically, you just need to recover DCs in this kind of format because there's quite a lot of enhanced hammer, and I don't think double puzzling for 1 plus another card is always enough. I think you need to actually get 2 back, also because of the attack with Jolteon and everything. Yeah, so I'd think I'd always play 1 in this kind of deck. 1 Super Rod, again, that's the kind of card I'd like 2 of, but it's tight for space, and I've opted for Karen in place. Not just because of the Pokemon, obviously, because getting back energy can sometimes be very relevant with Jolteon using the lightnings to attack. But yeah, I've settled for 1, and that's generally enough because you can get back the specific cards you need once. You get back Karen another time, and then that should be enough to give you a winning game, essentially, with 6 prizes. I think that's it for trainers. With energy, well, I've actually played 5 Lightning at Liverpool, but that's because I prioritised having the Jolteon and Jirachi a little bit more. I think that was good for that format, but going forward, there's going to be a bit less Dark Tina, a bit less of Veltal Garb, a bit less those kind of decks. I just don't think they keep up sometimes with some of the decks that are now being seen. Or at least a lot of people will test that, realise they're losing games, and then move away from those decks. I think the kind of more speed decks are going to come about. I think Garb is still good for that kind of format, but I'm not sure if the decks it was played in are still the decks it's best in. So yeah, basically with all that, essentially because the decks that played Garb were kind of weak to Jolteon and Jirachi a lot of the time, I was playing 5, but now it's gone down to 4. It's also a bit of a space issue, but I think 4's perfectly fine. And of course 4 double colourless. So I've actually gone on quite a bit there. I guess that was a bit of an inclusion of a tournament report. So I'll leave out playing any games, partly because I just draw dead all the time with this deck. I don't know why. I think it's a curse. No, I just got a bit unlucky at the Liverpool regional. In testing, the deck just never drew bad. Maybe like once out of 20 games, and then it bricked 6 out of 12 games. I believe it was 12. It might have been 13. You know, maybe just slightly under half. But yeah, got a little bit unlucky there. Well, quite, because the deck obviously was good enough to be able to win the whole tournament. But yeah, I think I read the meta well. It's my friend Ben was staying over, Ben from Team Cake, and we kind of hit onto it like the day before, and thought about it and realised this is actually a pretty good play for the tournament, even with a lot of Garb parallel kind of decks. And like I said, yeah, I went against quite a lot of those, but the reasons I lost wasn't even because of the Garb and parallel. It was just having dead hands. A bit of a shame, but yeah. So, well, that's the tournament report, I guess, in the deck. I think this is kind of an okay play for London. I'm not sure yet. I've not thought too much about it. I think people might want to counter it though, so it's something to be a bit careful of. But the problem is a lot of its counters are actually straight up beaten by other good meta decks. Yeah, so I'm not too sure if that's actually like the way to go. I don't think people are going to start playing Zeb Striker Quad Parallel City anytime soon, and if they do, they can lose to every other deck, and so be it. So if you do play this and you get beaten by Quad Zeb Striker Quad Parallel, I'm really sorry, but personally I think it's good. I think one thing to watch out for as well is there might be a little bit of a Raichu Bats resurgence. I think that deck's really inconsistent, but if you are expecting a lot of that, just you will lose probably with this deck, but like nearly guaranteed. But actually a second Hex in testing has won me that a few times because of just being able to Hex turn 1, they don't get set up. You Hex turn 2, take a couple knockouts, and then you're ahead enough that they can't just stream Raichus. You know, it's okay. I think I played 2 games of that, two of that online, and actually won both. Jirachi actually really helps as well because they only play double colourless. So yeah, it's not I don't know why I'm telling you how to play the Raichu Bats matchup. I think what you do is you go and get lunch when if you play that at a tournament. But it's Ray's got this build especially, I think, has got something for everything really. It's got something to handle every counter. If you are able to fit puzzles in here, I'd say go ahead, because that build obviously did really well, and it's got something to it as well. I have to give some credit. Basically, I guess another thing about the puzzles is being able to reuse Skyfield as well, and just being able to get the guaranteed pieces into your hand. I think it's okay, but personally I'm still a big fan of this list. And well, there we go, nearly hit half an hour of me rambling about a deck. So yeah, play this, have fun, bye.